Birds 365 here on the JAKIB YouTube channel. John McMullen Jody McDonald, being joined by our buddy from NJ.com, Chris Franklin. All right, Chris, here's where I want to start with you today. As fair and balanced reporters as we are, you are. Don't know about me and McMullen, but you certainly are. Give me both sides of the story. The best thing about the Eagles' victory yesterday was blank. The thing that I'm still shaking my head, or I have to admit concern over the Philadelphia Eagles after yesterday's win against the Giants was blank. Fill in the two blanks for me.
I think the best thing for me that I saw was that Jalen Hurts was back on the field. I thought that went a long way, and looking back on now, it's probably best that he got that game out of the way because he can knock some rust off. But for me, the most concerning thing, even with him back, was the red zone offense. I mean, you're 4 for 10 of your last times down there within the red zone, and you had to settle for field goals all those nimes as well too. I mean, it's nice to have Jake Elliott on your team when he's able to make that. We're going to probably see him on the special teams player of the week. I know kicking field goals.
Ooh, that's right. Tomorrow we may have
could be. I don't know. I don't know.
Mike Gill on. We gotta lock that up because we have too many Eagle Player of the Week announcements on this show. Yeah. Good point out of you, Franklin.
Yeah. Oh, it's nothing like 50-yard field goals, Chris, are the new 40-yard field. All these guys are banging 50 yards. It's amazing. It's amazing how good the kickers have gotten in this league. It's 52-yarder. It's like nothing to these guys.
Yeah, we got guys like Justin Tucker who's like in pregame, let me just fool around, kick 68, 70s, and let me just see if I got the leg. All right, I got it. Okay, cool. It's crazy. It's good to know that when you have a reliable one, it helps, but it's not. You don't want to see them often when you have an offense that finished one was for most of the season was in the top 3 when it came to red zone offense, and now you're having trouble executing. You need to fix that very soon before you get to the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that Nick, after in his post-game press conference, started talking about the red zone troubles as you were. And then I kind of pressed him later, and he's like, well, Jalen was fine, but the red zone issues, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, wasn't the red zone issues directly related to, taking his ability to pull the football because of his injury off the table? Didn't that equate to the red zone issues? Because to me, that's the whole thing. That's why the Eagles are so good in the red zone, because everybody's so fearful of Jalen pulling it out, taking it, in the back end, and that opens up things in the passing game. It opens up things in the running game. Isn't that the whole thing of the red zone difficulties?
The threat of him running does help with some of that stuff, especially rolling out. But when you have trouble just lining up and saying, hey, you know what, with this offensive line going against their goal line defense, saying, hey, you know what, we can't get 2-3 yards to get in the end zone, or when it comes to the passing off of that. I mean, if I'm a defender in space and the Eagles pull a bootleg out or they run a zone read, whatever, and you have Hurts rolling to his right side and you have bigger targets. When you look at AJ Brown, when you have Dallas Goedert all rolling to the same side, that had an issue. But then I remember looking at some of the tape. I haven't finished it all, but I remember looking at the one tape where there was a play where you had Brown and Smith in the same area, and he had to roll to his left. I think he got sacked or something like that as well too in that play too. So they got some stuff they need to work out on, because say if it's an NFC Championship game, you can't settle for 5 field goals from Jake Elliott if you're playing the 49ers.
And I think to kind of capitalize the game for me was the drive in the fourth quarter. They get it back with 10 minutes to play, and they take 6.5 minutes off the clock. 15-play drive, for all intents and purposes, put the game away there. But then again, settle for a field goal. 71-yard drive, and you only come away with 3 points. That was yesterday's game in a nutshell. Can they win like that in the playoffs? Can they win a 22-21 game against Minnesota or Tampa Bay or whoever they're going to play their first playoff game?
I think they can against a team like Tampa Bay, because I look at that offense and they just seem, I don't know what the heck is going on. It seems like they aged overnight. It's bad. But when you look, even in Minnesota, because I look at Minnesota when they're outside when they're not playing home and they're on the road, They come back down to earth. But if it's San Fran, nah, they can't. You can't win with that because they seemingly find ways to win late. And they're a physical team as well too, and they'll meet up with you. So that's why they got to convert at least 2 of those times down in the red zone. If you convert 2 of those touchdowns, then I think we're having a whole different discussion. We're talking about, all right, maybe Hurts should have thrown here. We're talking about that, but that red zone is just they got to fix the button up quickly.
Well, the only 2 teams the Eagles couldn't play in the divisional round are San Francisco and Minnesota. So of the 4 other teams, who would be the easiest and who would be the most difficult?
I'd probably say the easiest is Seattle. I think even though Geno Smith has had a heck of a run, this team has looked a lot. It surprised me. I thought they were I thought they'd have a top 10 pick. I thought that we look at all the moves they made. I'm like,
the Eagles have a top 10 pick officially.
Yeah, they do officially. Yeah, but it trades and everything else when it comes to that. But I thought I thought merit wise they'd be in the top 10 when it comes there. I think the Cowboys are the toughest team. I think when you look back overall,
Yeah,
I mean, even though the game's here, you look at the way it seemingly Dak plays against this defense, and you wonder how much of that passive zone we'd see. Obviously, they better make some changes. If not, Dak might throw for 75% of his passes. But I think the Cowboys are going to be a tough one. I actually don't think I'm not too worried about Tampa Bay right now. I think the Seattle's the one that's the game they win. They get that.
If Chris Franklin is right, I think Tampa's going to do the Eagles a favor. I think they're going to go in at home. I think they stay at home and actually take out the Cowboys next week. But we got all week to figure that out. All right. Big Play Slay. Doesn't like us using his first name, so I'll give him at least that much. Well, guess what? You're going back to being Darius next week if you don't pick up your game against whoever they play. John noted yesterday it was a pick 6, not a dropped interception, a drop pick 6 for Big Play Slay. His big play has really dropped off here in the second half. You got any reasons behind that, Franklin?
I think he's banged up. Just the way looking at the way that he's running a little bit for his getting more treatment and stuff like that. I think he's a little banged up right now, and I mean, I know the whole adage
Nate Gary, is that what you're telling me? He's actually playing hurt and they're keeping it under wraps and they're not saying anything.
I think he might fight you for saying he's Nate Gary instead of saying, he's not Nate Gary anymore. When it came to that one, he might fight you with that one.
You got the context I was putting in. Not overall talent level or accomplishment, just solely playing injured and keeping it under wraps.
You got Chris all choked up.
That'd be great. Yeah. But no, I think looking at it now, I think he's just banged up in the wear and tear. I mean, he's also getting older too. I mean, look at his age. I think he's 32, like that forever. I think it's starting to wear. It's wearing down.
I think it's also just part. He was so good in like the first 8-9 games. You know, you got to come back to earth a little bit. This is the NFL. I mean, it's difficult to play cornerback in the NFL. You can't have a 39 passer rating thrown against you for the entire season when the worst quarterback is like at 72.3. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You know, it's just there's a regression to the mean that had to happen. I think he's still a damn good player. I mean, again, everything's contextual. Look at the corners on other teams. I'll take Slay. I'll take Slay. Yeah, he missed an interception. Should have had it. No question.
Had that. It's a couple.
No question. And Bradbury's had a tremendous year. It's a shame Devonta is injured, but this group of corners is the best one I've seen in Philadelphia for a very, very, very long time.
The Bobby Troy out time. I think it's around there.
Yeah, probably you got to go back to that. And I would argue this group's better. I would argue this group's better because Bradbury's played off the charts. Now, Devonta, if he was there for 16 games, because he's been banged up twice now, he's missed a lot of time. But when he's out there, he's a difference maker. Look at how he was playing in that Dallas game before he got injured. He was playing great in that game. And all of a sudden he leaves and things fall off the rails. Yeah, I love this quarterback group, especially in this era where it's so easy to throw the football. I don't know how you could expect much more.
All right, so let me put it to both you two guys. Take what they had done previously in their career and just wipe it away. It doesn't matter one iota. Rank the 3 Eagle cornerbacks for me this year with their level of play.
I think Darius Slay's one because there's a stretch there where teams didn't even look at it. He almost basically cut the field in half where teams didn't really want to do it. The only time they throw that way was like a wide receiver screen or something like that to try to get him up there and try to make a tackle. That's the only time I think he's one. Bradbury 2, because I thought with that, based off of that, and teams were trying to attack him more, I thought he played well, and not only trying to basically limit the state teams try to test him deep. That's the only thing I worry about. If you get a guy, a real speed guy that like a Tyreek Hill or something like that, trying to match up against him going deep, that's the only time I have a question like what you're going to do with that. And Tyreek Hill, we all know what type of player he is. And then I think Matthews is number 3 because I look at what they did, and you can see the game plan against the Cowboys, what they were going to do. They were using him. He's an effective blitzer off the edge. He does very well in the middle of running and containing the thing. The only thing he's good for as a slot corner as opposed to being on the outside. So if I do a Slay, Bradbury, then Maddox overall.
Yeah, I'd go the same way. I mean, Slay, there is something too. Bradbury's played great. I'm not going to go all Bob Groats on you. I love the way Bradbury's played, but there's something to being the number 1 corner, and Bradbury be the first one to tell you. And Slay loves Bradbury too, but he's the great complement to the great corner. Like Darius is, and I use his first name, so he's probably going to hit me, but he's a top 5 corner in this league. He's top 5 corner in this
but
league.
I don't think he played like a top 5 corner this year. I
think
take away what you have previously done.
Yeah, I think this is one of the best seasons he's ever had.
Cornerback 1 in Jonathan Gannon's defense doesn't really hold a whole hell of a lot of water since they play positionally and sit in zone about 80% of the time. So when someone uses the phrase cornerback 1, I think of a guy who you're going to play man-to-man on, throw out on an island, not worry about bracketing him and no safety help. That's not Gannon's defense.
First of all, and I'll let you jump in.
Against.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I'll say, when you look at the job, look back to the job he did against Justin Jefferson back in week 2. I think they use the matchup. They'll tell him once. They'll use, depending on the opponent, they'll go sometimes say, hey, Slay, follow this guy around the field the whole entire time, and Bradbury go the other way. But also when you look at the way the scheme works as well, too, when the way it matches up and you don't know where you're going, like wherever guy's going, you don't know where you've got the deep third, even then he's still back there. If he's going to the quarter, he's still going back there. And then you say, oh, yeah, we want you to press and work the underneath. And when a quarterback looks, like you see quarterbacks in their progression, they look and go, they went and no, and they had to go this way because it wasn't there in time, too. And he gets to jump off. He reads the jumps off wide receiver as well too. So I think overall, when you look at it, I think he's played he's played well in that recognition.
Yeah, I think this is one of his best seasons ever. I think it's his best season as an Eagle. I wasn't as close to him in Detroit. I know how good he was in Detroit. I get what Jody's saying, and people think great corners, they think press coverage. In a lot of ways, I think, and I say it all the time, I hate this scheme, but for different reasons than fans. This scheme is so freaking hard to play because there's so much communication involved. And you see it with the other teams. You see busted coverage. You see it here. Fans lose their mind. But the Eagles are the best at it. They've taught it the best. And when they do have a miscommunication, it looks ugly. People often blame the wrong player. Slay is so good at it. Bradbury's so good at it. They're so savvy. They give headaches. A lot of it is zone coverage with man concepts, as you know. Sometimes it's man coverage on one side, zone on the other. It is a very difficult defense for the back 7 as a whole, including TJ and Kaiser. And the Eagles, over double-digit teams run this scheme, and nobody runs it better than the Eagles, and that's because of the corners. That's because of the corners. That's because of Slay and Bradbury.
Certainly a key element to the Eagles' success defensively. All right, one of the things they missed out yesterday on was their usual quarterback pressures. They got 2 sacks, neither one of them in the conventional way. A fake punt got him a sack, so it wasn't your usual Eagles pass rushing day. How much of that was because Josh West wasn't in the lineup, Chris?
I think he's I think when you look at it, he's an impact guy that when you use him in there, and I mean the way he's been playing, he's been one of the better edge rushers in the league. I mean, when you look at his sack totals, most of them was coming in the second half of the season. And you look at that, you're like, all right, you see that. So I think a little bit of that came into fruition. I was surprised. Like I looked at Robert Quinn yesterday, and I was shocked. I was like, you know what? He put some pressure on there a couple of times, and he made that smart play of when they were trying to do that quarterback throwback. He knew the zone was open, and that he followed them that way too. So I thought that was encouraging. But there's a drop off when you lose a guy like that. It is pressure. He's still a young guy. Still has almost used to the word of high motor. Stay away from that. But he was able to go right at the edge. He's obtaining pressure. So I look at that. I think that was a big loss for him. But I think the good thing for them is that he's going to be back for the playoffs, especially that neck is good enough. I mean, we saw him in the locker room. But we saw him in the locker room. Be like he was in good spirits, and he's looking around. Was healthy enough that he can go eventually by the time the divisional round rolls around. So that was a key thing I think as well too. But Evan Neal, he had a bad game.
He struggled. Yeah, he struggled as a rookie. You know what though, Andrew Thomas. Another high draft pick of the Giants. It took him a while, and he's had a very good season. So, I think Evan Neal is going to be a good player down the road, but he has struggled mightily as a rookie. You mentioned that fake. I didn't even know if it was a fake. It was the worst run fake in the history of mankind. I don't know what they were trying to do. I thought it was just a messed up play. So I want to, as a whole, the Giants didn't play anybody, Chris. I mean, they didn't play anybody. It was a joke of a group of players. I know they're NFL players. I shouldn't go that far, but they did not play any of their key players. To me, the most disappointing aspect, we asked you that earlier. To me, the most disappointing aspect was the Eagles had to play their starters the entire game. Now, they got out of it without injury, but do you make a lot out of the fact that they struggled with that group? I mean, it's no Barkley, it's no Lawrence, it's no Williams, it's no Andrew Thomas, it's no Daniel Jones, Adoree Jackson, on and on and on. Everybody. They sat everybody. And Davis Webb is not an NFL quarterback. I'm sorry. I said Davis Webb. I always say Davis Mills. Davis Webb. Not an NFL quarterback. Now, it was 19-0. If they intercepted the easy interceptions, it probably would have been the blowout. Are you a little concerned how they struggled with these players?
I think the only thing is I thought they used a lot of vanilla stuff on both sides, especially defensively. Like they weren't using they weren't using a lot of the exotic stuff that they've done in the past. So that way I'm not overly concerned when it comes to there. I thought they gave the thing I would say that I was concerned with is the way they didn't get the Giants off the field a couple times on third down defense, which has lingered throughout this whole second half. And that's a huge concern for me because if you let Davis Webb find the open receiver on like third and 8, third and 9, when you actually do get the stops on first and second down, then what are you going to do when you see some of the better quarterbacks in the league coming up here in the postseason? So I'm not too overly concerned. Now, if they were throwing out all their exotic whatever, even though the Eagles do finish in the middle of the pack when it comes to blitzes, they're throwing out exotic blitzes and they're throwing out exotic coverages, and they truly game plan for Davis Webb, and he was just still finding it, hitting in the open areas of the zone. Then I'm like, they're in serious trouble. But looking as he went vanilla on both sides of the ball, I'm not too overly concerned yet.
Chris, you said the facing the quarterbacks coming up in the playoffs. Well, the Super Bowl would be the playoffs too. Would be a nice spot to be in the playoffs. But what quarterback you afraid of in the NFC that the Eagles are going to have to face here?
I think they're still, even though I said earlier when it came to the Tampa Bay offense not being it is, Brady's done it in the past. You still don't want to give the ball if it's a close game like that. I still don't want to give the ball to him with 2 minutes to go in the game. I look at Dak just by basic the history of that, and there's something about Shanahan what he does with guys. He gets the most out of guys like Garoppolo, and you see what he's doing right now at Brock Purdy. I think it's just the window dressing that the 49ers have where they run those jet sweeps. They basically like, hey, look over here. Oh, there's a wide receiver going to bind, and they run out the backside there. So I look at that.
We're going to hear a lot about if it's 49ers Eagles in the championship game. We're going to hear a lot about eye discipline that week.
Yep,
a lot about eye discipline because
it's like the wing tee in a way. It really feels like you're watching wing tee football, but it's the pro style version of it in a way. But I think those are the 3 quarterbacks right now. I'm like, they give a little trepidation right now for his defense.
Boy, I can't. Jody and I talked about it. I can't be fearful of Brock Purdy. I want Brock Purdy. I want to be the shoe.
Brock Purdy disrespect.
I want to be the shoe that drops on that head. If I'm a defense, I embrace that challenge. I'm like, you know what? F this. This is freaking Brock Purdy. We're going to shut this shit down. That's how I would approach it if I'm a defensive player. I really would. I would take it as, man, we're going to show the world that midnight is striking for this guy.
I'm going to paraphrase a Rocky 3 quote, Rocky 2 quote. He took his way back from being Mr. Irrelevant, and he just kept coming. You don't need that man in your life. Hey, man. Let him go.
Take it both ways. Take it both ways. I'm sure Kyle's using that as well. But my only point is, look, Dak Prescott, we know the game he had yesterday. Kirk Cousins, we know the game he had in Philadelphia earlier this season. Those are good quarterbacks. Now, they're not Patrick Mahomes and they're not Joe Burrow, but they're good quarterbacks. I can't bring myself to say they're not more of a concern than Brock Purdy. San Francisco as a whole is more of a concern because they have the better supporting cast. They have the better coach. But just the position, I mean, those guys are better. Is anybody going to disagree with that?
No.
But I think he gets the ball to the right guys and he gets it quickly out. And that's where I think makes the whole thing go. And that's what concerns me with him. That's it.
I think the quarterback you should be most fearful of, believe it or not, is Kirk Cousins. Now, the Vikings I'm not fearful of because their defense just flat out stinks.
Oh, it stinks.
I think if you get into a shootout, even a recovering Jalen Hurts, I'm going to take him to be able to outscore Kirk Cousins. But if you're just talking about solely the position, not the team, I think Kirk Cousins is the quarterback.
Yeah, he makes some throws, man. He makes some of the most difficult throws and on-target throws. You know, him and Jared Goff as well makes those throws. And for whatever reason, they haven't had great supporting cast. Jared went to the Super Bowl and everybody acted like he was incompetent. I mean, he makes some of the tightest window throws outside of Aaron Rodgers in his prime, but for whatever reason, people don't. Kirk's the same way. Some of those throws down the field to Jefferson, I mean, they're dimes. Yeah, I can't. I mean, I can't. Brock Purdy can't do that. But the supporting cast is tremendous in San Francisco. I picked him to go to the Super Bowl. Supporting cast is tremendous.
To go full circle back to when John and I started the show, it's funny because I was going to go there and John went there before I even got him there. If you were to rank the quarterbacks that are in the postseason right now, we ran through the NFC guys. I take Trevor Lawrence over any of them. I take Joe Burrow over any of them. I take Patrick Mahomes over any of them. I take Josh Allen over any of them. it's not even close between the AFC quarterbacks
No,
and the
it's
NFC
not.
quarterbacks. There is a massive drop-off. Just the quarterback position we're talking about. I just said Kirk Cousins is the quarterback that the Eagles should be most afraid of. Oh, he'd be sixth on the list if you put all the AFC teams in there.
Well,
That's how much better the
I would
AFC
only
quarterbacks
say
are.
I agree with you, Jody, and I'll get Chris your thought on this. Like long term, I'd agree with you on Trevor Lawrence, but right now, I would take Dak
Next
and
week.
Kirk.
I'm just
Yeah,
talking next week.
Next week, I'd take Dak and Kirk over Trevor Lawrence, not over Mahomes and Burrow and Herbert and Josh Allen. Who'd I miss? The top four. But right now, and 2 years from now, yeah, I'm with you. Trevor, way more. But right now, I'd say Dak and Kirk are better than him. It's still early in that process. Doug is doing a tremendous job with him, though.
If you give Trevor Lawrence, Jefferson, and put Kirk Cousins on that Jaguar squad, and Christian Kirk's had a nice year, but I think
one thing I know about
exactly
Kirk Cousins
is doing.
One thing he might not win at night, but one thing I know about Kirk, he's putting up freaking numbers. He's putting up numbers. He put up numbers with Christian Kirk. Trust me. Look at that guy. 4,000 yards year after year after year after year after year. Touchdowns. You know, I'll say this, and if you want to look up his numbers, look up his numbers. If by some magic of God, lightning strikes, and he has the Nick Foles run, people are going to start talking about him as a Hall of Famer because his stinking numbers are so impressive. Watch. It's not going to happen. But his numbers, I encourage you both to look up his numbers after we get up this show. They're outrageous. Year after year after year after year. And that's why, by the way, I'm not a numbers guy because it doesn't tell you the whole story.
We'll see how much they really want him in the Hall of Fame when they actually decide what time that game is. Because if it's something in the afternoon,
yeah, exactly. Put it at 1 o'clock. He's got a chance. Put it at 1 o'clock. Unfortunately, the NFC Championship game is not going to be at 1 o'clock, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, so Kurt's in trouble. Always a pleasure, Stud. Appreciate you coming on, Chris. We'll have you on again next week, even though Chris always comes on after a game. There is no game next week. We still count on you, Franklin.
No. NJCot.com, by the way. Read Chris at C Franklin News. I
promise I won't be hungover or anything like that from sleeping off and enjoying the time off. And I'll be good. I'll be here.
You should get hungover.
Drinking watching the other NFC playoff games to find out who the Eagles play. But it'll be up with us.
There's still work to do. Yes. There's still work
Chris,
to do.
good stuff. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks. Y'all have a good one now.
See you. Chris Franklin, NJ.com, here with us on Birds 365. All right, running a little late. We'll come back. We'll put a bow on the show. We're counting down to Eagles playoffs here on Birds 365.